And we're back with another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, and today we're going to be focusing on Bionicle mocks that are specifically more humanoid in shape, or at least kind of close to that. We'll discuss as we go, but I wanted today to focus mainly on just sort of very stock standard kind of builds, human in shape, or more specifically Toa to some degree. We've got a few Toa in here, but not all of them are specifically fitting the title of Toa. But yes, for those of you who might be a little bit more new with this, is the Bionicle Inspiration series where we showcase mocks from the Bionicle community with a specific theme of sorts, today being Toa/humanoids. And we do our best to just cover all the different techniques, what's going on in the mock, and if you're planning to build a humanoid or a Toa or something similar to the theme, maybe some of these ideas can inspire you so that you can work out some of the problems you might be working out if you're currently building something similar to this. Or heck, just seeing what other people are building can often be a nice little thing that sparks something inside your head and gets those creative juices flowing. So really that's what we're intending to do here on the show, is just to inspire you to build your own cool stuff. So without further ado, let's begin. But before we begin, I lied. We're not beginning just yet. I want to say what is a humanoid? You might be like, I don't really know that word. Or even still, hey, sometimes it's nice to read a definition and increase our understanding on something. So the word humanoid, I'm looking up the dictionary definition here on Merriam-Webster, and it says, a humanoid being, a non-human creature or being with characteristics, such as the ability to walk upright, resembling those of a human. And then it goes on and says this, why do people respond so strongly to penguins? I know why the definition says that, and you might be like, Ben, you're lying. Here's proof. And also, just Google humanoids, you'll see it. So yeah. Penguins, apparently. I don't understand that. The other definition here says, a humanoid is a non-human creature or being or robot with human form characteristics. I think that's a pretty simple way of looking at it. For the most part, they resemble the shape of a human. And I think you can kind of play within those limits, but for the most part, it's just a human that is not necessarily a human, but also kind of can be a human. I don't know. It's a weird term. But penguins, and also human-like in shape. So, speaking of which, let's begin. The first mock that is that of a humanoid is by Buttloaf Builds, my boy Buttloaf, and this is Norik. So Norik is a revamp of an old Bionicle set, also called Norik. A set that I never ended up getting, but I really like. It was always one of my favorites as a wee lad. And Mr. Buttloaf Builds here has revamped it in awesome form, I think. Some stuff that immediately grabs me with this is the inclusion of all these different whip pieces that kind of makes it look like different kind of wires and things. And the fact that he's partnered them very nicely with older looking Bionicle pieces, which are in fact actually quite old too. They came on the Rakshi there. And, you know, oh God, what year was that? I want to say 2003. That doesn't quite sound right. I don't know. Still quite old at this point. Early Bionicle we're talking here. It's even old grey. So it's, you know, an older piece. But the texture of it as well just naturally looks a little bit more robotic, a little bit more sort of gear-like and greebly and mechanical and industrial. It has an older look to it. And I love that aesthetic here. It looks like this is sort of like an unarmored robot that's maybe like a prototype or a very freshly made robot, or maybe one that's sustained a little bit of damage, and so there's no armor over the top of its circuits and its inner workings. And so the use of all those wires there and those older pieces really gives it that beautiful look. I think it's such a unique design, not something you see that often, and very, very well executed. It's not a lot of pieces. It's just those whips, those wires, whatever you want to call them, and those older Rakshi joint pieces. It's pretty simple, but pretty effective. I think it creates a beautiful, more sort of like scrappy, industrial robotic look to it. You know, typically a lot of the Bionicles we see are very heavily armored. They're, you know, they look all refined and factory new and shiny, you know? I like that this is that more stripped down aesthetic. And I like that it is partnered with a slightly more armored aesthetic there as well. I don't know, it's just this really nice sort of ragtag look that this mock has. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's a fantastic design. And elements of that are also continued there in the torso as well, as you can see, which is really, really cool. So a solid, beautiful aesthetic there. I love too the weapons on this. Very similar to the original set, but using some very different, more modern Bionicle pieces. I think it's just a nice welcome addition there. I always love seeing that Nuparu Mari shield being used. I think it's just a great piece, and I don't see it being used that much. And you love a good shield. Shields are good. Yeah, fantastic stuff on this. Another thing I quite like is the inclusion of the trans orange. So originally Norik was like silver and dark red. Kind of like the fact that Butloaf here has taken out the dark red and has instead just put this trans orange in here. I don't know, to me it kind of almost looks like this robot's been designed to manipulate magma or lava in some fashion, and there's certain parts of the body that kind of contain elements of fire or magma, and I don't know, they sort of just like ooze or glow out of more transparent armor, or it's actually stored inside some sort of containment field. And I don't know, that's what that specifically looks like to me. I think it's just a really clever way of playing with an element for a Bionicle, you know? Again, it's a little bit more unique, a little bit more different. I don't know, that's specifically what I saw. Maybe if Butloaf was seeing this, he'd be like, "It's not what I wanted, Ben." Which, yeah, I apologize, but that's at least what I'm seeing. I think that looks really cool. And even, too, just having that block of trans orange there, just aesthetically, I think looks really nice. So, really solid stuff there. Beautiful mock. I love how the legs sort of taper down sort of into the foot there, kind of just bulging out slightly. It's just a nice-looking design. The legs do have a bit more of a kind of digigrade look to them, so it's a little less humanoid in that regard, a little bit more sort of chicken-like, as it were. But I don't know, I still really like it. I still think it's very fitting, and it's, again, a very different approach for this mock, but very nice, very nice. So really solid work there, Butloaf. I love what you've done. Very unique and very different take on Norik. It's awesome. Let's move on now to a mock by Inhuman Builds, and this is Inhumane, and this is version 3, which he is sort of, I guess, subtitling, Reborn. So this was built for a contest, but it's also just a revamp of his self-mock specifically. And it's got some really good stuff going on it that I wanted to talk about. So, specifically, the first thing that really grabbed me is, I mean, this mock's name is Inhumane, and I feel like it does have a very, like, inhuman-like look to it. I love how he's taken the Pohatu mask in black. It doesn't exist in black. Either he's painted that or that's some super rare misprint, but I imagine it's just a custom or a painted version of that mask. Looks really cool in not orange. I like it in black. It's very nice. But I love that he's partnered it very nicely with the Brain Slug piece. I feel like you don't see those Brain Slugs being used that often. They're kind of a weird and obscure piece. They kind of really just fit their original purpose of being a Brain Slug, being a thing that goes over the top of the villains' heads from the brain attack wave of Hero Factory. But I love seeing it on this mock for multiple reasons. One, I love how he's partnered it with Pohatu's mask, because naturally it was just more of a mouth mask. I don't know what word you'd use for that. Pohatu's mask, the top of it was that trans blue heads-up display. And instead of using that piece, he's used the Brain Slug. So he's partnered the two of them very nicely. He's taken a mask that naturally has that gap in it and found another piece that perfectly fits that gap. And just, the pieces complement each other very well. It's really nice to see, in my opinion, there. But also that Brain Slug is a very beautiful sort of marbled mix of colors. It's almost got bits of yellow, blue, green, lime, all sorts of stuff in there. It is this, it looks really cool. And I think the rest of the color scheme of this mock actually perfectly complements that. Typically I might sort of look at this color scheme and go, like, it's quite a lot of colors. I don't know. And that being said, if a mock has a lot of colors in it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's, a bad color scheme or anything. But I think including that Brain Slug piece in here really just kind of brings out those colors even more. So having the trans green, having the trans light blue, and even the bits of yellow thrown in there as well, it just complements that Brain Slug well, and it all just sort of ties together nicely. And so I think the color scheme on this actually really shines in that regard. I think it's just a really pleasant sight to see. I also love, too, how when you look at the back of this mock, the Brain Slug's tail just sort of flows out and is kind of complemented by all those little bits of electricity at the back there, those electricity pieces from certain Breakout Hero Factory sets. Again, color scheme complements it nicely, and also just the kind of visual imagery of it, just these sort of jutting out lines. They just transition one into the other very nice. And it kind of fits that Inhumane look. It looks like he has this spiked back, which you wouldn't typically see on a humanoid, right? Because we as humans don't have spiked backs. Unless, I don't know, maybe by the time I record this episode, some crazy's happened in the world, who knows? But currently, we don't have dinosaur backs. But this guy does, and I like that, So yeah, playing with that crazy, inhumane, sort of experimental look that this mock is playing with. The Brain Slug head fits that. The spiked back fits that. And I also think that the torso fits that quite nicely. The torso is sort of a little bit more unarmored, It just has those sort of two pistons coming out of it. To me, it looks fairly similar to the last mock we saw, a little bit like unfinished, but not in a bad way, in a good way. You know, maybe you'd want to put armor on that normally if you're going for a sort of very typical Toa or a knight or something that you might be building. But the fact that this is sort of more of an experiment, or this mock is inhumane, like he's saying, it's a weird sort of mutated, unique creature. I haven't read the backstory on this. He himself said it's very lengthy and long. So if you want to check it out yourself, check the links in the description. You can read it yourself. But I get the aesthetic that this is a sort of crazy, weird science experiment that's been mutated by, chemicals and diseases and whatever. So I like the fact that the torso deliberately looks a little bit more unfinished. There's even sort of trans blue pieces in there that could be sort of guts or other, unique internal organs and things. Again, it's playing with that experiment prototype look because it looks a little unfinished. It's not quite done yet, or there's supposed to be something there, but this came to life and changed, and they didn't get to add the armor they wanted to there. I love how that looks. The final thing that I really like is all of these yellow washers, or those little sort of ring pieces. I call them washers. I think they have a different name, but they're cool pieces. And there's a bunch of them being used here. I kind of almost see them as like boils or warts or something. Some kind of crazy weird thing that's just growing out of him. It could be just a part of the mutation, I don't know. I think it fits very well, and which I think is surprising. I don't know. It's just a technique that took me by surprise when I saw it, and I really like it. So, really solid mock here, Mr. Inhuman Builds. You've done a good job. Let's move on to a submitted mock now. It's by Gralam19, and this is Savi, Toa of the Sun. So there's something really unique about this that I love. Typically when we see a mock that has an element of sorts, you can kind of get away with just having it be like, red if it's a Toa of Fire, or maybe you want to accent it a bit more and really put actual physical flames on the mock, and it's a bit more obvious that it's a Toa of Fire, or their sword is a big old flame sword or something, so you can really see the element. When you look at this mock here, it's more sort of silver and grey, and I go like, oh, is that the sun specifically? But when you see this fantastic like necklace and this sort of robe that flows down and this really shining yellow, it really does look like the sun to me. One, I think this necklace is gorgeous, just the way that he's used a bunch of different tail pieces and claws and things to almost create this sort of circular shape, and has these jutting out sides, which looks like, some depictions of the sun with its, rays flying out of it kind of thing. The necklace resembles the shape of a sun, and the big, bright, strong gold and yellow also really resembles the sun. And so I kind of love the fact that he's made it silver and grey, because it really makes the necklace and the robes and everything really, really pop. And it kind of reminds you of the sun even more, because the sun is this super bright, shining thing. So when you partner it up with these darker colours, it looks brighter, So I think that's actually a perfect idea for a Toa that has the power of the sun, or their element is the sun, or they're just a Toa of the sun. I know that's what they specifically said here, That is one of the cool things about Bionicles. There were the, main elements, and then there were some other expanded elements as well in the lore that never got characters or set specifically. But hey, you can have a Toa that's got powers of whatever you want, There's plenty of possibilities. But no, I love the playing with the colors here and the specific shape of that necklace. It's awesome. I love too some of the more kind of mythological aspects of this mock. It has a bit more of a royal grandeur to it with that robe and that necklace, but also the mask, the way it just sort of kind of has this crown at the top of it. It looks like that of a god or some sort of ancient Egyptian headdress of sorts that a pharaoh might wear or something. It looks more regal. It looks more godlike. And then we look at the feet, and it looks like they've got little wings coming out of the bottom, like Mercury, the messenger god, Like, there is this more regal element to it, and almost sort of dipping into elements of mythology as well, which I think is just cool, So I definitely recommend doing that, if you are playing with something like the sun, or you want to dip into sort of myth and legend and stuff, look at some of the characters from that stuff, see what things they have, whether it's wings on their feet, ornate headdresses, or whatever. Certainly worth looking into some of that, because like we see here, there's a lot you can play with, and it looks really cool, So yeah, I adore this mock. Lots of fantastic stuff going on it. Love your work. Let's move on to the next mock. This is Sentinel, and it's built by Unoriginal. That's his name. The man's name is Unoriginal. I'm not calling him an unoriginal man. I think he's got some cool stuff. But yeah, this is Sentinel, and I think he's really cool. I love specifically like the knees on this mock here. There's a lot of I don't know. It looks like a very sort of like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like an Iron Man style kind of armored mech, or maybe that of like a Gundam mech, perhaps. There's this very sort of smooth and beautiful robotic-like armor to it. And I love that the knees here are very much accented by that Hero Factory body piece. It's quite large, it's quite in charge, it's quite big and empowering, but kind of works for the aesthetic of this. It is this sort of, I don't know, war machine kind of robotic thing. And I don't know, I think that's cool. I like seeing mocks that really do accent or kind of pronounce the knee of the mock, because I don't know, it works well. Even though unlike a typical humanoid, the knee isn't that pronounced. I think you can take liberties with it, and it can work well, like we see here. I also love the head design on this. There's just something very, I don't know, he's called it a Sentinel. It looks like a sort of more sort of sci-fi, futuristic looking design, and specifically the color choice of that translight blue and the white there. It does have this futuristic look to it. And just the choice of the eye being this sort of solitary line that goes down like that. It looks really cool. It looks really interesting. It looks very distinct and different. It's nice. And something else that's distinct, different, and nice is when we look at the back of this mock. I love just, first off, the choice to have those armor pieces at the back there with that slight curve. I don't know, there's something that looks very back-like to that. Poor choice of words on my regard, not the best description, but like, I don't know, when you study that of a human's back, just the way that naturally the bones and the muscle look, I feel like that kind of perfectly mirrors how those armor pieces are looking there. I think that's just a good looking back design, you know? But the other thing that's awesome here is the choice of using this slightly newer Lego element to give him this sort of like booster rocket on the back of his back. Great, it looks awesome. It seems very fitting with that futuristic vibe that this mock has. And also, it's just great to see that piece being used, because it is a new piece. It's from this specific Lego City fire truck set here. And it's this cool piece, because the blue bit kind of pops out and is supposed to mimic that of like water coming out of a hose, you know. But when it's been used here on this mock, it looks like a sort of booster rocket that you can kind of tuck away, or you can have it pop out, and then the actual booster element of it sort of pops out and fires out like that. I think that's awesome. I think it's a great use of that piece. And a really fun and surprising play feature as well. It's really nice to see. So yeah, I absolutely love your work there, good sir. You've built a very original mock, Mr. Unoriginal. Love what you've done. All right, let's move on to the next mock. This is by Dr. Toxic, and it is called The Beast. So yeah, it's still, for the most part, fairly humanoid in shape. Of course, the arms are far longer than that of a typical humanoid, but I think you can kind of take those creative liberties. You can do what you want, you know. Mr. Dr. Toxic's made a very sort of sinister and evil-looking mock here. I love how he's taken that Onawa mask there and put what I would imagine is some of the very small pins into the eye and put the studs over the top of it to give it really, really strong, creepy-looking eyes. It's really interesting to note that a lot of those original Bionicle masks had some weirder connection points like that, where you can kind of slide a piece into the eye hole on that mask. It's debatable if it's legal, you know, maybe you're putting a bit of stress on some of those pieces, but some of them are surprisingly good and don't seem to be putting stress on parts, so it's up to you. Play around with it, you know, try putting some pieces in it, see what happens, but I think it looks cool, and I think it's a very fitting mask design for this guy here. And also, I really enjoy the very long arms on this guy here. There's something very nice about this segmented design using those very small Hero Factory bone pieces and just repeating them in that manner. It almost looks like the different segments of a bug. So it kind of just, I don't know, makes this very unsettling, long, creepy looking arm design. But also the fact that the arm is far longer than an arm should be is a little unsettling, which is fitting for this deliberately very creepy looking mock. And, you know, that's something you see on a lot of monsters in pretty much everywhere. You know, it's for the most part a normal human, but you know, certain parts of it are far longer or far shorter than they should be, and that just gets into creepy territory because it's different, it's abnormal. You know, it's cool, it's really cool. I also love these very long fingers. The fact that there's a lot of posability on them, using a whole bunch of different clip pieces. And all sorts of craziness, so that you really can get a lot of articulation into it, which I think just doubles on the creepy factor, especially because they're so long, you know? It just feels like he's going to reach out and get you, you know? It's fitting, it's cool. So, you know, a little bit of a slight change to the typical humanoid shape, but I think a very welcome one, and very fitting for a specific sinister purpose. It's really nice. And of course, it's a Matoran. It's a smaller guy too. You don't have to build a typical sort of Toa-sized mock if you're building a humanoid. You can go small too. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's move on to the next mock. It's by Mitch Phillips, and it's called Toa Tyrant. Tyrant. I'm going to call it that. There's a lot to love about this guy here. I love the mask design specifically. It's using a whole bunch of different system pieces here, and it creates this very unique, very different shape to it. It looks a little bit more sort of, I don't know, to some degree regal or more sort of ancient, perhaps. I don't know, there's something very nice about it. Kind of reminds me of a bunch of different 3D printed masks that you can get. But it's nice to see it being built with system pieces because, hey, it's Lego. You can do what you want. You can build whatever you want, Get some of those smaller system pieces and you can make some really nice custom masks like this. It's awesome. I love too when you look at the side, there's kind of that red bit at the back that sort of juts out slightly. Kind of reminds me of some of the original Bionicle set. Pretty much all Bionicle sets really that had eyes. The translucent part of the eye would sort of go out the back of the head as well. So I like that when he's built this custom head here, he's kind of kept it similar to the... This is very typical like trends of Bionicle eyes and masks and heads and things. I think it's just a fun little detail. Another fun detail too is the choice of putting a lot of gears on this mock. I don't think this mock actually physically has any gear functions. If you turn that gear, I don't think anything would happen. But I like that you can see the gears at the front and the back there. Again, just a little bit more akin to the Bionicle sets that had those gear functions to them. I think it's really cool. I still love the inclusion of some of these weapon pieces. I believe they're called Sais, those Electra weapon pieces. They're in gunmetal. They're used there on the shoulders, and they're used there on kind of the ankles, more the sort of middle of the lower leg. I think it's just a fun little slight detail. It kind of just adds a little bit of extra armor, and it just kind of looks nice, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, even if it doesn't serve any kind of practical purpose. I think it's nice to just sort of occasionally put a little smattering in there of non-Bionicle pieces, some more little system highlights, because it can look nice, I still have the choice of putting the big old blue sword there on the torso. One, it just kind of looks like nice torso armor, but the way it flows downwards, it looks like a sort of tunic or kind of waistcoat or some sort of battle armor of sorts. It's great. And when it's partnered with some of those dark blue pieces, it looks really, really cool. Gives this mock a really nice, strong silhouette and this awesome sort of warrior-looking armor. It's really nice. So a lot of lovely looking stuff going on here. Some very fun little snipe techniques going on and an awesome custom mask. Let's move on to the final mock. This is by Alex Mertens, and this is Zoinkatron. So just quickly, the description here says that this is based on some concept models that for Bionicle sets from 2005. I believe you can see these in a behind-the-scenes interview in one of the Bionicle movies. I want to say, I swear I remember looking at these when I was a kid. But they're cool. They're really cool. I'm showing you some of them now. I don't know specifically which one Alex based them off. There was one that I was like, oh, it's got to be that. And then I saw another one. I'm like, oh, maybe it's that one. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But regardless, I love the idea of looking at a bunch of the different concept art or concept models from Bionicle. If you give it a Google, it'll be pretty easy to find. There's a fair bit of it out there. Or there's stuff like the art book as well, which you can find images from that online. And it's pretty easy to look at all those concept models. And hey, maybe you can build a version of it yourself, very similar to what Alex has done here. And he's done a pretty bang-up job too. I think the overall design of this guy is awesome. And I love how the different masks are inserted on this mock here. The fact that pretty much the bulk of the dark green, not all the dark green, but most of it is those masks. Just a nice way of kind of blocking it all together. But I love how those masks sort of perfectly flow into other pieces. The Vakama masks in dark green there, just the way that they flow down into the lower arm there, honestly, I think that's just a really solid and smooth transition. The fact that the eyes on the one on the torso there have those wires coming out of them, again, that just looks very seamless, very fitting. It doesn't look forced or anything. It looks like it was designed to do that. And the way that flows into the masks used on the knees there, that's even more beautiful. This fantastic use of just the natural gaps and natural edges on those masks and having another one almost sort of perfectly slot in there. It's really fitting. It's really cool. And it's just really nice, It's really, really cool. So, overall, I think this is absolutely gorgeous and great use of those different masks there. I love, too, the choice of the kind of little blue flame on that, flamethrower weapon on his arm. It's one of those pieces you find on minifigures these days, specifically in superhero sets where it's sort of that power effect. You can kind of flick the side of it and it sort of fires outwards. Just using that there as a little sort of blue flame. Again, very fitting, very, very, very nice. And I love the head design too. This sort of tri-eye, 3 eyes there. Very interesting robotic look to it. It's very cool. So you could argue that this, again, does sort of stretch the limits of being humanoid. Those legs aren't really what a human's legs look like, and the head sort of coming more out of the chest rather than the neck specifically. You could argue, again, that's not specifically humanoid. But also, again, I think that's for a more specific reason too. And also I think it's just a great way to approach any kind of mock that you want to build. Take the very typical human shape and go, okay, what if the legs didn't just flow down in a straight line? What if they kind of did a zigzag? Or what if I moved the head, instead of it being up on top of the shoulders, what if I moved it down towards the chest? Or they didn't actually have a head, their chest was their head. Or what if I give them 5 arms instead of 2 arms, you know? And that's just a great way of approaching a mock, is taking that typical design and finding ways of changing it in some regard. Because honestly, I imagine that's how a bunch of different aliens, unique designs and things from pop culture are made. People just play around with what's typically there on themselves, on typical humans, and find ways of making it a little bit more abnormal, a little bit more different, and then you get some cool ideas, you know? So I think that's a good way to approach something, and I don't know if... Well, Alex certainly hasn't done that specifically within his process. He was basing this off the concept art, but that could be something that works into your process. Might be worth giving it a try, perhaps. Anyway, a lot of fantastic mocks in this episode. Really cool to dive into some humanoid mocks. Lots of really cool stuff today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got a little bit inspired yourself. If you would like to see some of your own mocks featured on the show, the best way to do so is to submit them to the submission email. It's in the description below, but you're also seeing it on your screen right now. Send me whatever the heck you want, whether it's 1 or 2 images of your mock, you want a very small description, a very large description, completely up to you. And don't worry, just submit your mocks. Doesn't matter what my next episode's theme is going to be. Just submit it. I tend to base episodes around submissions, much like I did this episode today. Additionally, in the description are links to all the mocks you saw in today's episodes. Like I said before, there's a whole bunch of beautiful stuff that these guys have built that I haven't even talked about. So head on over to their social media, the links are below, and see what they've done. Additionally, speaking of social media, there's links to my own over in the description down below. And it's, pretty straightforward stuff like my Instagram, Flickr, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. Posting some of those fairly regularly, so you can always see what sort of stuff I've got going on, things I've been building, all that sort of stuff is over there for you. Additionally, there's links in the description to my Patreon, so if you're interested in supporting there, you can do so. You get access to things like my private Discord server, where you can have a nice private chat with me if you'd like. Actually, in that Discord server now, we're currently working on our own little collab. So, hey, if you want to be a part of that sort of stuff, consider supporting over on my Patreon. You can also get access to my podcast as well, my little personal podcast there. So, might be worth doing. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you, and good night.